Welcome to the podcast Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. In every episode, we interview business leaders who are navigating the complex world of B2B marketing. Whether you're trying to grow revenue, swoop into a new market, or launch new products, we promise you've landed in the right spot. And now your host, Richard Byrd.
Welcome to the Above the Clouds podcast. Today, we have Shelly Linkerhof. She is the head of marketing communications for Clariant. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to have you here today, and because I think you're going to have some insights that are really going to help a lot of our listeners. And I really love having guests that have work for international companies, because we had a conversation around the office the other day about account management and managing international clients versus managing American clients, and you really have to think about it differently when you have an international client. I mean, there's the logistical things like time zones and stuff like that are logistically challenging, but I think it's the amount of polish. I think that European clients especially have, and even when you get to Latin American clients and all these other clients that are used to work internationally, they show up right on time. They're ready to go. They expect you to be very prepared. That level of expectation is so much higher, and so I love bringing on international guests. So thanks for being on the show.
It's good to be here.
Our first question we always ask our guests is, your company were a bird, what kind of bird would you be?
Thank you for the challenge of trying to find a bird. And I definitely had to do some research on this one, and I discovered the kingfisher, a new bird to my vocabulary, so thank you for that. The kingfisher bird is about the size of a swallow, but has a bigger head, very long, a skinny beak, very colorful feathers. The wings are always contrasting to the chest. So what's nice about the kingfisher is they have a Greek mythology background. So the scientific name is rooted in Greek, and back in the day, their belief system was that these birds were able to nest in calming waters. So the gods must have given them powers in order to calm the water. So there's this connection to calm water and these birds, which is also a sustainability aspect of this bird, because they're an indicator of healthy water, which was, again, very fascinating to learn about all of this. One, from a personal perspective, I love water myself. If I can have a vacation or have a Zen moment, it's always by water. And Clariant, we have two key strategic pillars, innovation and sustainability. So this bird represents sustainability, clean water, and as a chemical company, especially a chemical company, which we'll get into a little bit later in the discussion, we are always looking for sustainable solutions. So there's one, parallel between the bird and the company, as you've asked. And then the other one is the innovation aspect. This bird is a symbol, you could say, of nature inspiring inspiration. So a scientific discovery that they have found is the long, skinny beak. The bird dives in first, by beak first, and that very few water ripples, very less noise. And so they've realized that if you have that type of a nose, then you can go faster, and it helps with the sound barrier. So the Japanese bullet speed train was designed with that in mind.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. So then again, we in Clariant also are looking at nature for inspiration, and we just published an innovation video on our LinkedIn and website about GlucoPure, which is a product that is, it's a surfactant that's linked to sunflower oil and glucose, so sugar. And when you mix the two, it makes a very good solution for washing dishes, good on grease, soft on hands, and then also good for the environment. And it's also good for textiles. So it makes the clothes softer, makes them easier to iron, and less wrinkle. So again, this bird who inspires inspiration, we, as in Clariant, have a good parallel to that.
Yeah, there's some awesome parallels.
Yeah,
I love that. That's a really great answer.
Yeah.
And those are such cool birds. I see them. I'm a kayaker, and so I'll see them on the water out, and when we're in the bayous and lakes and areas of near the coast. And they are always so cool to see. Everyone gets excited when we see one.
I can't wait. I've never seen one in person, so now that I know so much about them, I'm ready to look out for them,
if
for
you're
sure.
On the Texas lakes, you'll see them. And I will tell you that it is true about their grace. because the other birds we see a lot out there have the same habitat are pelicans, which are also really cool birds, but they are the least graceful bird ever. and with the way they fish, they make a terrible noise, a big splash.
Exactly.
They're just gangly. And the kingfisher, such an elegant bird.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, a lot of birds get their prey with their claws.
Yeah.
Again, an innovative way and a different way for them to feed is, diving beak first into the water. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about Clariant?
Okay. So, Clariant is a specialty chemicals company based in Basel, Switzerland. And we're global. And we have a purpose-led strategy that is encompassed in a slogan that says greater chemistry for people and planet, and which is a really great way to sum up what we do on a daily basis, constantly looking for innovative solutions, pushing that innovation box, looking for ways where we can improve the environment, working with our customers to understand what their needs are in their end formulations and how we can work with them to try and find that. So you need people to do that, and conversation and collaboration and so forth. We make chemical solutions for a wide variety of industries, ranging from oil production, chemicals, mineral processing, catalysts, all the way to personal care and healthcare, right?
Wow.
So it's a very, very long industry verticals in that sense, or multiple industry verticals. So we get to touch a lot of facets of life.
Yeah, especially chemical, I think, is one of those industries that people don't really think about. And it is literally in everything. It's just and it goes, like you said, it spans all these boundaries and different industries and, different processes. And they might use the same chemical at a food and beverage facility that they use at a oil refinery, and they do the same thing. But I think so many companies couldn't produce their final product, or sometimes the specialty chemicals are part of the product, not only the process of making the final product, but they're actually in the final product.
Right.
It's a really interesting space. There are a lot of challenges, I would imagine, in kind of getting your head around all the different verticals and all the different geographies that you guys will definitely be touching on that. Tell me, how big is your team? How do you address all those challenges?
Sure. So my marketing communications team for the Americas, there's 5 very creative, talented professional ladies and myself. The team spans from North Carolina to Houston here, all the way to Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and everyone has a certain number of industry verticals in their portfolio that they partner then with that business segment. We're a centralized function together with corporate comms, brand, digital, issues management, and so forth. So we all work together as a global communications function, and then we work very closely with the businesses across the different segments. So myself, overseeing all of them, it's about 14 that we're constantly working with on a daily basis. I'm always working on a few, so I refer to it as like stakeholder gymnastics. I probably could get a really solid gold in that category, because you're just jumping from one business segment to the next, just really trying to understand their dynamics, the landscape, customers, and how we can best add value to their, hopefully, business growth, right? That's the aspiration.
Yeah, that's right. That's at the end of the day, that's what we're judged by in the marketing world. I bet that would be really challenging, just because I bet the buying center and the way their customers buy and all that has to be very different across those industries.
There are definitely some differences. For instance, in the mining business that we have, the sales cycle could be 5+ years, because you're not going to change your mineral processing chemical components overnight. That if you have a product that's not working and the plant has to shut down, you're talking billions. Oil plants are millions. Mining plants could be billions. So you really have to be very careful when you're wanting to introduce a new solution or changing some things based on the customer's operations, right? Whereas you look at personal care, trends are changing every year. Consumer trends, what they're looking for in their cosmetics, what they're looking for, hair care, skin care, and so forth. So they're having to come up with different formulations annually, and their buying cycle is very short. So your mindset changes, the process to make decisions and so forth is a very different approach.
Yeah, you got to be a lot more agile.
You do.
And the yearly planning is probably gets a lot more interesting in that world than in the mining world.
Yeah, it can be. But there's a lot of similarities too, because we work with formulators. So the customers are the formulators. They're the ones with the formulations to make what it is they're trying to do. Try not to get too technical because I could geek out any moment if you want me to.
Geek out. We can geek out on this is a show.
Yeah, we can geek out on.
It's a show by geeks for geeks.
So for instance, if you look at a cosmetic formulation, they need different components. We don't supply all of those components, but you need to understand what they're trying to do. Are you trying to less wrinkles? Are you trying to have shiny hair? Or do you have textured hair? All of those different components, and then the formulation needs to be crafted to develop a certain need. So then our products need to be able to help them address that issue, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to have that customer intimacy to be able to understand what is it you're trying to do. So maybe this product, or we need to combine those two to make a different product in order to make this work for you. And so, and a lot of times we don't even know what cosmetics our products go into because there's secrecy, agreements in place. So that, that's that end. But if you look at oil production chemicals, for instance, there are so many different factors there. You have pressure, you have temperature, you have the length of the umbilical if it's offshore, where you're pumping, surface temperature, and then underground temperature. I mean, I'm really not even scratching the surface on all the variables, but you have to have a chemical solution that's going to stay together, that's going to work. You can't plug your umbilical because then you're not getting any
game over.
A product out. So it's a very fine line that our oil production services team has to monitor on a continuous basis. So then you have to make sure that chemistry solution is going to work. So again, customer intimacy, understanding their operations, understanding what their KPIs are on an operational standpoint, and the components of the crude. You can have high acidity, you can have scale issues, you can have paraffin issues, you can have all of those issues.
Yeah, so it might change from this month to next month. You might introduce a new challenge once you go into a different layer.
It can, that most definitely. So again, it's the similarities that we have across the board. It is the customer centricity, understanding their operations, so then we can be able to advise and work with them best to come up with the right solution.
Yeah, well, that's interesting too, because I think this is similar to a lot of our other clients where it's a very technical sell, and your salespeople are almost always PhDs or these kinds of people. It's not somebody you just hired off the street and say, hey, go sell this suffragant. And
that is true. I probably have worked with some of the smartest chemical engineers, scientists, all types of the STEM areas you can think of, right? And me being a classic marketer, trained in marketing, I'm fascinated how that world operates, how their language, and then having to translate that into a marketing speak is a language in itself. And so I have put a lot of, you could say, brain investment into understanding their world, translating it to make it sense from a marketing standpoint.
I just feel like that is so important for marketers to be able to be passionate about understanding what their company does. I worked for a nerdy company in-house marketing department one time, and I had to hire the people to come and help our internal clients. At first I wasn't very good at it, and it took me a while. Well, some might argue I was never good at it, but I certainly was not at the beginning, because I would bring people in because I would think, okay, well, they're very talented graphic designers, or they have really good smart writers, and a lot of them would fail in that role. And I thought, what is happening here? And the thing that I think I landed on was that to be successful in that role, you have to have curiosity about the technology, and it has to be innate. You have to just be curious about that stuff, and because if you're not, you won't take the time to learn that stuff. You just said you dove into it and you learned about it, and that was the biggest contributor to the success of somebody in that role over anything else, because they were all smart. I mean, they wouldn't have made it through the interview process if I didn't think they were smart. They were all nice, and they wouldn't have made it through that. They all I felt like they fit our culture, but man, without that, I just don't think you're going to be motivated enough to really take a deep dive into these, what some may consider, dry or boring topics. And I think that it's just critical. So I'd love to see how passionate you are about chemistry.
You. I'm glad to see it comes out. I think my high school chemistry professor would be quite proud of me, right? Because I wasn't quite, passionate about chemistry in high school for sure. So if I could look back at my younger self, it's like, pay attention a little more. But back then it didn't make sense, right? It was just equations and, beakers with smoke out of it. And you didn't really connect on how this makes our world go round, or it makes it safer, it makes it easier, it makes it, we have light in places that we didn't have light before. I mean, that's just the silliest example of what chemistry's done for us, but it really is an element that we can't live without now.
Oh, for sure. I had my high school chemistry teacher, Mrs. Olson. I love you if you're listening. Thank you so much. She really helped me a lot because I thought chemistry was going to be fun and it was all going to be in the lab and very hands-on and, mixing chemicals and learning how to make stuff blow up, and then I got in there. It's like you said, it was like these long equations, and I'm dyslexic, and so it was really hard. You mess one thing up and you're done, and you could do the whole thing. So I got terrible grade. I failed my first test, and then so my cousin was in school to be a dentist. He was really good with STEM. So I asked her to help me, and she really coached me into all these other things. And the next test came out, and I got even worse score. I got a 40 on it. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I talked to Mrs. Olson, and I said, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And she says, what do you want to even do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to go into advertising. And she's like, well, what are you even taking this class for? And I was like, well, I thought I had to take it. And she really was the first person who told me, there's some classes you have to take, but then there's some that are under your control. Go take a writing class. And I was like,
probably really good advice.
You can do that? It was the best advice ever. And I was like, it was the first time that anybody really told me that I had control over the things I got to study as a freshman in the high school. And I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. All right, you got it. I'm gonna go take something fun as opposed to this that is crushing me right now. So if you're listening to this, Miss Olson, thank you very much.
Where would we be without our high school teachers?
I know, right? How are you managing that team? Sounds like they're all over the place, and hopefully you're getting to go to Sao Paulo as much as possible. I love Brazil, but hopefully you're going to be able to do it. What are you looking for when you look to bring on people on your team? How are you helping them to understand this complex world? How are you shaping them?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does start with recruiting. Thankfully, the last few hires I've had have just been excellent additions to the team. There's definitely the level of they need to be curious, for sure. They need to have some confidence that they can ask for help, that I'm there to help them, because we are in a very complex world. The matrix aspect of a global company as well is something that if you're not used to, you have to teach how to navigate. Multiple stakeholders, different personalities, different cultures. So it's a lot of talking. Thankfully, I like to talk, so that fits well in my wheelhouse. The one question I do ask during my interviewing process is, you're going to work for a chemical company, and there's probably going to be somebody in your personal circle that's going to, speak ill of chemicals or the chemical industry and how bad it is. How comfortable are you going to feel to defend the company that you work with?
Wow,
and
great question.
Yeah, and I have actually been able to kind of weed out the ones who I'm here for a job versus I really think that I could do something within this role. And I really appreciate the deeper answers that I've received, and then I thus hire them, and they've been quite successful in the role, because this isn't just a job to do marketing, which a lot of people just want to do marketing. This is a job, indeed, you need to be curious, you have to ask a lot of questions, you can't be afraid of the chemistry, you can't be afraid of the complexity. Some of the things I still don't understand, and I have to tell my stakeholder, I'm like, I don't quite get the chemistry, but I know the marketing side of it, and this is where I feel confident to be able to give you the advice that you need from a marketing standpoint. Let's try and figure out how to help me with the chemistry, right? And when you're able to have those open dialogues with your technical team, they always love showing off what they know, which I appreciate. I love showing off what I know, so it's a reciprocal relationship in that standpoint, because I get to teach them about marketing when they're open, and then I get to learn more about the chemical solutions. So that has a lot of grounding, foundation, training to be done from the recruiting, onboarding perspective. And then from there, it's just applying the knowledge in the projects, understanding multi-channel strategy. It's not just a trade show anymore. It's not just getting a brochure out like it used to be. I mean, if someone asks me to make a brochure, then okay, we're having the wrong conversation, and you can count on it that I'm going to change the conversation very quickly into what is it that you truly are trying to get done. And I'm confident it's not a brochure, so we're going to park that, and we're going to really talk about what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then you really then get to dig into what their sales goals are, what the customer mindset is, and then you just have to ask a lot of questions. And so that's how I'm continuously training the team, whether they're having those conversations or I'm sitting together with them in the conversations with our business stakeholders to understand, indeed, okay, what is this customer trying to achieve? What do we do that's different than everybody else so we can help promote that distinction in the market? Because everybody could make a chemical solution almost, not everybody, but there's a lot out there. And so how are we going to let everyone know about Clariant, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it's a constant training field, which is fun too. If you're curious and you keep wanting to learn, there's always something to learn.
I love it. And I think that is something that we see a lot too, even as consultants, people come in and go ahead. But people come in and they are like, oh, they've self-diagnosed is what I like to call it, And technical people are really good at that because they're smart, right? And so they're like, oh, I'm experiencing this problem. Here's what I think I need. You can go. I think that's such a smart question to say, why do you, it's interesting that you picked brochure as the thing you're asking us for. Tell me what you're trying to do with this. Why do you think you need a brochure? What are your goals here? And in STEM, they have first principles, and I think marketing has them too. And I think understanding the goal is one of the first principles for marketers.
Marketing has, in the past, had a bad rap, and it's because we just throw brochures out or we just buy ad space and it doesn't bring any value back. And now times are too lean anymore. We can't afford just to spend money to spend money. Yeah. We really need to come with the value creation through that. Thankfully, digital marketing is helping out a lot with that. You can customize, who you're trying to talk to with what kind of materials. You can track it now, from once I give you, if I do give you a brochure, once I give it to you all the way to hopefully they end up on the website and they're asking for a quote or a sample. You can track all that now, which is super helpful. And also even with existing customers, you're understanding, more and more through a digital interface what their buying behaviors look like. And so you're able to help them with that. And we didn't have that before. That's helpful. But then you're also digging into another type of marketing competency that we do need to build and understand not only within the organization, but also within the team. So that goes back to your earlier question of how are you helping your team? And digital competencies is something that we're always working on and building.
And that's challenging because it's always changing. And, I think as somebody who's been doing this a while and supposed to be the CEO of my company, so I shouldn't be getting my hands dirty and getting in the weeds and things, but I can't help it. No. Because I want to know, and I got into Google Analytics the other day for a client. It had been a really long time since I got in there, years, and I was shocked at how much it had changed. And I was like, I don't know, which end is up anymore, and nothing. Why is anything clickable? It was really challenging to get in there and figure it out. But I did figure it out in the end. In fact, it was a lot simpler than it used to be. But I didn't find it as useful as it used to be. But I think and it's like that with everything in the digital world. They're always changing their product. They're always changing the way things are. I was in HubSpot the other day, and I was trying to add somebody to a marketing list, and it was like, and I couldn't find it. And they changed the name of list to segments. And I'm like, okay, well, why did they do that? That was not helpful. But it's like just staying on top of that stuff is challenging. What are you doing to make sure that your people and yourself, stay sharp on all the latest and greatest digital stuff?
We have a digital competency center that sits in corporate communications in Basel, Switzerland. So that global competency center we have a few experts there who stay on top of all the trends for us, and then also work with us very closely on the HubSpot marketing, the website, the Google Analytics. So that's really kind of the core competency there.
That's
and
wonderful.
That we tap into, and that they work with us on our campaigns. And then we just recently introduced a regional SPOC, single point of contact, for all digital marketing activities as well within my team. So it's a development opportunity for that individual to work closely with the competency center globally, but also working across all of the industry verticals, not just the one that is assigned to them in their portfolio, so they can see HubSpot or other digital marketing tactics are used across different customer segments, so that widens their development lens within that digital marketing aspect. So when we have issues when we're doing our own campaigns, or we're having challenges or questions, we can have someone in our time zone that helps us out. If there's something that needs to be escalated, fine, it can go to the global competency center. So that's a way where we're constantly trying to stay on top of it. Obviously going to conferences, reading up, following the HubSpot trainings. As you can tell, we're a HubSpot user. All of those different things, curiosity, trial and error, challenging each other, going, okay, who's going to do this one, or how have you done that? Sharing best practices. We're constantly doing sharing is caring, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what has changed. So it is a constant weekly, monthly process. You can't just go, oh, well, there's nothing going on this week.
Yeah.
You're going to miss it. So
that's right.
Yeah.
What a great resource to have, that
Yes.
center of excellence that you can rely on. And of course, it's a STEM-based company, so it has an acronym name. So that's what you can always count on for STEM companies.
Always.
And I love that, you guys are HubSpot. One good thing about HubSpot to me is that their training is, I think, world class. The videos that they have and then the help you can get on there is really useful. So I think that's one I've been known for, being kind of guys just throw people in, let them figure it out. And that's and I've maybe changed my mindset on that over the years, gotten softer as I have gotten older. But that's one I feel very confident about. When people come and say, hey, how do I do this in HubSpot? I'm like, did you check their
library is extensive.
Check their library?
Yeah.
Before you come to me with any HubSpot questions, I want you to look in the library. And then if you can't find it there, hit the chat, because their chat is great. Like you'll talk to a real person, has real answers and all that. So yeah, that's great that you guys are a HubSpot shop. It's interesting, international companies, I think I see that more with domestic companies or people who work in one country more than I see people work internationally, just because of the email laws and all that other stuff. How are you guys managing that?
We have one person in the corporate communications team. That's not all they do, but that is a component of their job that works very closely with legal compliance. And because the EU actually has more stringent laws than everybody else, and being a European company, we do have to follow those laws. And they keep us updated. And, this is how you share a list. This is how you don't share a list. This is how you delete a list when you're done because of the GDPR that you have to follow. And then you learn that Brazil does something different. You're like, great. And then Mexico does something different. Wonderful. So again, going back to that international component, I'm like, great, but we're still the EU company and we're following EU laws, and you get this wah, 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 in other places where it might be more lax. But it is what it is. And in the end, we should, manage data privacy. That just is a fundamental thing, I think, for humans to do. And so, happy to follow that compliance law, even though it can be a bit cumbersome. And
you're right. People around the world don't see it that way. We're working with a client that is an international company, and we're operating with this. They were in Houston, and America's a Wild West show when it comes to data privacy and data collection and all that stuff. And they were like, you can't send that out. And we're like, well, they signed up on the website. And they're like, yeah, but they didn't click a special button that says that they would like marketing materials. And I'm like, well, the person who set up this form 3 years ago didn't have that button on there. And they're like,
hey, better add it now.
I'm like, well, no time like the present, I guess.
It's an easy button to put on there. So
exactly. I love how you're incorporating the training of your that learning in your natural meeting pulse. I think that is really important because, like you said, there's frequency to it. And if you're just waiting to do that quarterly or at the end of the year, or hopefully somebody uses their training and development budget, going to be too late. Yeah,
most definitely. And the businesses look to us as their strategic advisors to be on top of it. They're like, hey, we'll know our business, you know the marketing part, and then we expect you to help us with that. So we're constantly trying to be ahead of that curve and introducing new ways of working, new marketing tactics. For them, maybe for us as being seasoned marketers, might not be so new. But again, how we can get them to be one step ahead of the market as well. It's important. Tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today. When you're in that high school chemistry class, did you think you would be where you are today? Absolutely not. That was definitely not the career path. So I'm impressed that you already knew in high school that you wanted to work in advertising. But no, actually, it was my sophomore year of college. It was my first day of my first marketing class, and the professor, she was just like, "This is marketing." I'm like, "This is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." Never turned back again. And she was my only female professor in both graduate school and undergraduate, and we're still very close to this day. Man. So what an impression that she's made on my life. Thank you, Dr. Bezjan, as A little shout out for
All right.
Dr. Bez out there. So after I graduated with the marketing degree, I moved to Dallas from Southern California. So I definitely have the bumper sticker. I got to Texas as fast as I can. I earned my MBA at UT Dallas, and I wanted to go into international marketing. That was something that I really felt like that would be the next big adventure. So I was successful in getting a job in the Netherlands. In Rotterdam, and so took that next big step and moved over to the Netherlands and ended up staying there 17 years,
Wow.
which was not part of the initial plan, but it worked out for me. I worked for Shell for 13 of those years, and that was just an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, that's a company that knows a little bit about chemistry and chemicals
Yeah.
and lots of verticals.
Yes, indeed. And I did end up having the opportunity to work for quite a few of the different downstream businesses, lubricants, chemicals, aviation, and the base oils business. So in that sense, I had different marketing jobs, communications, branding, change management. It was just a place where you grew up. For sure, and
Sure.
really learned a lot of the fundamentals of corporate life, matrix organization, global teams, stakeholder management,
Yeah.
constant change when you're in a big organization like that. But just the smartness that I was surrounded by was just mind blowing. It was wonderful. Great people. So great opportunity to grow up in.
Yeah.
Good environment. And then I worked in a lot of different markets. So you're exposed to the international elements, ranging from culture to regulations to, just to go to market. Like this market, these are how the customers work here, and that's how the customers work there, and this is how you have to alter your approach in this market. So you do end up realizing the agility and the nimbleness if you're going to sit in a global role, how much localization will be necessary when you're trying to roll out your marketing plans and your growth strategies. So that was a great opportunity. And then when I moved back to Houston, there was a role here in Clariant that was available for upstream marketing, so the oil production side, and I had never done that. So I thought, this is a great opportunity. Then I really have end-to-end hydrocarbon value chain experience.
Sure, yeah. They're so different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
So I really can say I know how the molecule gets out of the ground all the way to your pump or into other applications. And so that's been a very rewarding part of my career for sure.
That's just such a golden opportunity that you had to get over to the Netherlands and work for such a wonderful company like Shell. So they're such a professional organization. They just really do professional development right, and the training and the international exposure and all those things. And that was your first job?
Oh no, that was my first big global company that I had worked for. I had worked for smaller companies before then, and sales. I worked in advertising, business development, and so forth. They were much smaller. There was still an international component to some of those roles, but at the scale of Shell and the brand management aspect, the reputation management, that was a whole new level for me.
Don't mess with the pectin.
No. No.
I did some Shell brand work.
That's holy.
Yeah, they were
that is holy ground.
Yeah, I did something with it that I didn't do it again. Let's just say that.
Yes. Those are the mistakes that you learn in your career that you do once and never again, indeed.
Exactly.
Unless you don't want to keep your job.
Yeah,
if you
don't want to work for Shell anymore, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want to with the pectin.
Exactly. Exactly. But again, I think that goes back to a company who understands the value behind their brand. And when you mess it up, it messes everybody up.
Sure.
I mean, you would hear stories around we would mess something up in a market on one side of our business, and that impacted our potential contract for another business. We're still Shell, and the customer still sees Shell. And Clariant's the same way. They see Clariant. It doesn't matter if it's our catalyst application or our plastic solutions application or our renewable fuels. We are still Clariant, and so therefore the advantage that I have is because I see all of these industry segments active in the market, I really try and build the synergies because I know that that's great for our brand holistically. And having that enterprise mindset, I really learned in Shell, and I try and bring that into my day-to-day operations within Clariant.
Yeah, that's great. I think that really positioned you for success in your role at Clariant. I can only imagine. As you think about your career, what's the biggest lesson you've learned along the way?
People.
Yeah.
People make it. They make it or they break it. So I've learned from the people that I don't want to be like, from a peer-to-peer collaborative perspective, from a leadership perspective, a line manager perspective. And I've learned how to do it from the line manager, leader, and peer-to-peer.
You can probably learn more from a bad manager than you can a good manager sometimes, because you're like, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that, definitely not doing that.
Yes, or I hope I'm not doing those things.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that just goes back to the difference that people bring to their work life. And I think that's also evolved, where people are trying to also be more authentic, trying to bring their self to work, whereby they're trying to connect more with people. I think before it was all, this is who I am here, but I'm not going to be like that in the private setting. And that brings those masks, I believe, are a lot less than they used to be, which is helpful. But the people make it. I mean, the people element of the role and what you do every day is what I get out of bed for, right? How can I be my best for my team? And then how can my team do their best so they feel good about coming to work every day? I learn every day on how to make that work. Everyone's different. They're analytic, they're creative, they're communicative, they're thoughtful. Realizing that in each individual, then you tap into that. It's just like a wellspring, right? And then you're really able to help continue to develop that. And also areas where they're like, I'm not comfortable with that. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
What is it about it that doesn't make you comfortable? And is it a fear? Is it a confidence? Is it a knowledge? Can we tackle it? Or should we just go, okay, we're not comfortable with that. Fine, let's do something else. And it's being able to have those conversations that I really appreciate.
That is such a great lesson for everyone. I think that not only your direct reports, but also your internal clients, your managing up. I mean, I think all that is such an important thing, and I think that's something that it took me a long time to realize that. I was raised on the golden rule of like, treat everyone the way you would like to be treated, and it's the worst advice ever. Because not everybody wants to be treated like I do.
That's true.
Like, I'm a person that gets embarrassed by praise. I don't like it when people give me attaboys. It's embarrassing to me, and I can't. I'm terrible at taking compliments, and it's just awkward. It's very awkward for me. I was like, well, I didn't, but then I realized there's a whole group of people who
that feeds them. That's their energy.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, they'll wilt.
Yeah. They really don't do it. And so I'm like, oh, I got to understand this. Or like, I grew up, here in Texas, and everybody was always pretty direct with me about stuff. And you don't do it that way, you do it this way. And I was like, okay, well, I was pretty direct with stuff. And I was like, oh, wait, no, you got to put pillows around that for certain people. And knowing that has really, helped me. I think the other thing that you talked about there really touched on something our previous guest talked about, was about questions. I think asking those questions and, encouraging that dialogue and getting people to open up is so important. And I think people either go, when somebody raises a issue and say, I'm not comfortable with, that's a great example. People either say, okay, well, we won't do it, and they retreat because they don't want to have the conversation, or they will try to go into persuasion mode.
Yes.
And both of those things are terrible.
You're not getting to the root of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on? Why do you feel uncomfortable with that?
Well, you're also building trust with the person as well, which is important. And that's what I learned, for an example of someone you don't trust, well, then I'm not going to open up to you. And then therefore you've closed off a relationship and you've closed off opportunities.
Yeah.
The one thing about marketing that they don't teach you in school is you really have absolutely no authority within an organization in a lot of instances, right? Yeah. So it's a heavily influence based role. So I think future marketers need to understand how much influencing that they'll need to do because of the strategic advisory role that you end up playing at all levels, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, building trust, building alignment, the collaborative mentality, trying to understand what we're trying to do from a business standpoint is critical. If marketing people think that they can just blow over everyone, it's like, this is how we're going to do it, you're going to be lonely. You're not going to get the alignment that you're going to need in order to make it happen. So
it's
a big
100%
lesson.
True. Yeah, you have to be collaborative. And when I worked for a large company, I was in a role, and it was a challenging role in that I hadn't any authority in that organization, but I had to tell very powerful people no about a lot of stuff a lot of time. And after I left to go start my own thing, I was talking to the person who replaced me, and he was really struggling with that. And he goes, I just don't have the same authority that you did. And I was like, I didn't have any authority. I didn't have any authority at all. But I'd make it a collaborative discussion. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I knew what we could publish on our website and what we couldn't.
Mm-hmm. And why.
Yeah. And if they didn't understand that, then they would get mad at me and report it to my boss if they wanted to. But I knew he had my back, and they didn't want to have that conversation with him. I was way nicer about it than he was going to be.
Yeah.
And so that's what you just have to be a dialogue, because it's like you said in marketing. I remember my son was in Boy Scouts and he was an Eagle Scout, and he hated leading other boys, and he's like, I hate this. And he's like, they don't listen to me. I can't make them do anything. And I was like, well, welcome to the real world. That's probably the most valuable. If you don't learn anything in Scouts other than you don't need dots. You don't need any of that other stuff in the real world. But you have to learn to work with people. You have to wield soft power and get people you have absolutely no authority over to do things that they need to do that's better for the whole organization.
Yeah.
That's just life.
Very lonely if not, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I guess, it's really interesting. I love to hear this. Another thing they don't teach you in marketing school, and I can tell you've learned it by the School of Hard Knocks, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you have gone through some sort of training, but it's about leadership. How important that is in marketing or any kind of management role. But if you're leading people, management is so important, and you seem to be really a great manager and really understand people and all that. How did you go through training for that? Did it come naturally for you?
I would say a good mix of both.
Yeah.
My father was in the Army, U.S. Army. Yeah. He retired Command Sergeant Major, which is the highest ranking enlisted role within the U.S. Army. So
awesome.
There's some baked in leadership there,
Sure.
and just in watching him growing up and learning from him people skills. So I give him a lot of credit there.
What a great role model.
Yeah, excellent role model. Also around accountability, authority, and just, taking that responsibility for leading that many people.
Sure.
It was interesting when he moved over to corporate life, he called me up one day and he goes, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, Dad, what's the issue? And he says, I have no authority over these generals that I have to work with, but I need to tell them. Normally in a military setting, general has the final word.
Rank and file.
Exactly. And he says, I have no authority, but I need to influence them. And so it was the role reversed. And so then he had an insight into my life on, I have no authority, but I need to influence a whole lot of people.
No one says, ma'am, yes, ma'am to you, right?
No. No. So indeed, that was a nice little conversation that we had as adults, right, to sharing those experiences. So that was early on. And I did have like class president role here or there. So you learn it kind of through school, through clubs, through sports. I was, soccer captain, that kind of thing. So you kind of have a bit of a trial and error just naturally there. But then Shell, and thankfully, again, the great training spot that Shell was when my first official line manager role, they put you through frontline manager training. And it was a 2-year course. And that on top of everything else, right? And because I was in the Netherlands at the time, I had the decision to either take it in English or I could have taken it in Dutch. And I had already done all my Dutch classes and I had passed all that. And I thought, well, I could use another challenge. Let's do this in Dutch. So I followed the program in Dutch for the 2 years. And
that's awesome.
So I added another dimension to it. But what was very interesting, and which I didn't know at the time, was I ended up being in a class with a lot of the refinery managers and who were leading the blue collar, workers that worked in the site and worked in the plants. And their world is completely different than, kind of that marketing customer facing world. But it gave me huge insights to their challenges and what they face and what change management looks like for a plant, and building those relationships and understanding how to speak to the audience. So when I was doing internal comms, I was able to have some visual customer personas, if I can use that terminology.
Sure.
If I had to write pieces that was targeted for that audience, or if I was wanting to speak on their behalf, or at least this is what's coming from a plant perspective. So that was a huge learning opportunity alongside of just learning how to be, the leader from there. I found out that the English speaking class was full of international people, the white collar office setting. And I was kind of glad I didn't do that, because then that's a homogenous setting of which I work in every day.
Sure.
So
you know that world very well.
I do. So I appreciated that, and it did improve my Dutch.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work, extra work on my end, but
that's a challenging language, too.
Apparently, I like challenge.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you up for a challenge?
I'm up for a challenge. Sure, I'm up for a challenge. I do not back down from a challenge.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Well, that is really cool. I think there's just something to, in an organization like that, knowing what the frontline people are doing.
Yes.
Walking the floor
Yes.
of a plant or a workshop or getting on an oil rig. I think that was something that was such a good education, for me when I worked for the large company, sitting in the ivory tower or what have you, and just getting out there and seeing them run the tool you're going to be marketing just changes everything.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wow, this is how they do it. And this is more complicated than I have. And this is a really stressful event. What if we weren't sure if it was going to work because it was a pilot project? All these things that people, and like how the rig hands talk to each other and all these other things. And that really helped me later. We were usually talking to engineers and petrophysicists and those kinds of people. When we had something that was sold directly on the rig floor, it's like if you're talking to Bubba on the rig floor, you got to talk about it way different than you would to a geophysicist sitting at Shell
with his PhD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
It's such an interesting world.
Yeah.
What's one thing you know about your role that you're in today that you wish you would have known from day one?
Oh, the chemistry.
Yeah.
Definitely. I should have paid more attention to my high school chemistry class. I think that is one of those things where, it's always hindsight's 20/20. However, if I would have known more chemistry, would that have made me any better at my job? Because there's other facets of that too, right? Like I said earlier in our conversation, the amount of influence you need to do, the stakeholder management, that's what I've learned. I learned a lot of stakeholder management working with Shell, but I know in Clariant, most definitely now you're being in a much more senior leader position. There's a lot of that upward stakeholder management as well. And you really have to understand, what are their priorities and then how I'm fit into their priorities, which normally isn't one of the bigger ones. You got to get product to customer is always that. You got to make a profit. There's always that. So you have to understand your role in that pecking order. So I think, college students today who are looking at roles, don't underestimate public speaking, don't underestimate, the stakeholder management place, don't underestimate, working with people, because this is definitely a people-centered job.
Oh, 100%. One of these buzzwords is kind of out, and for people is like executive presence. So nebulous, such a weird thing to say to somebody. You don't have enough executive presence. But it's so important. If you're going to get on sit there in the boardroom and look across from the C-suite and say, here's what our recommendation is for this. And as you mentioned, you really don't have any real authority. You have to be able to say it in such a way that they go, what a great idea. Why haven't we been doing this before? I love it. Let's go. But then, talk to the person at the plant. You got to talk to them in an authentic way, too. So, I think that's great advice.
You're almost a bit schizophrenic in a positive way, in the sense that you have a lot of different voices in your head that you're trying to speak to, right? So I think marketers make really good communicators in that sense, because marketing isn't necessarily just communications, and a lot of time people think that they're the same, but that is not the case. But the thing about marketers is they understand the essence of influencing different customer personas, right? Whether it's an internal employee where you're having to help them, understand the strategy, so then they can move along with you. If it's your stakeholders, like you think of the investor community, if you're trying to, looking for additional investment for your company, again, the brand reputation management, God forbid there was anything that would happen from an issues standpoint, you're always thinking in that customer persona mindset. And I think that marketers really, truly, if they do it right, can really help a company accelerate their narrative in many different facets, not just to the customer. And sometimes I feel organizations have not understood the value that marketing can bring to the table if they just gave us a little bit more, breadth. Within the organization to influence a wider part. But a lot of times they're like, oh no, we only need the brochure, that's it. So you're like, okay,
I know.
Great.
It's really true. And I think that's where asking that question that you asked to the other person, is like, that's interesting. You asked for a brochure. Tell me, what are you hoping to do with this? Why don't you, it's an interesting thing to ask for in the 21st century. What do you want to do with this?
Right. And anymore, again, being a sustainable company that we are, we've pretty much stopped printing brochures. We're like, look, half the time it ends up in a trash can. So let's do things differently. So a lot of the trade shows now, we do a half-page like postcard, and with just a little bit of information on it, with the QR code that we now can track, that can go to the website, that they can get more information. And we tell customers, because they're like, well, we want a brochure. It's like, listen, we are a sustainable company. We're trying to reduce our printing. If you're wanting to really learn about our solutions, happy to share them with you. Please go to our website. You'll find a contact on every page, and just reach out. And we're happy to, or give us your card, and we'll make sure we'll reach out. And then when you explain the story, they're like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I said, plus, are you going to take all that paper home in your suitcase?
No.
Right? But a half-page flyer, we're hoping you're taking.
They might actually fit that in and carry on.
Exactly. And they're like, okay, when I get back to my office, I've got this. And so we've noticed that has worked much more sustainably and more efficiently and then we track it. We know if they've scanned it or not, because you have those tracking mechanisms now.
That is so important, to know that somebody actually looked at it.
Yes.
And you can't get that with a print brochure.
No. And when you have a technical sale that we do, God bless our engineers and our scientists, they want to put every data point on a brochure.
I believe it.
And sometimes that's super important, and I want to respect that, because they've put a lot of hard work into that. Instead of saying, no, I don't think that'll work, let's find a way where that could work. But I think from an initial introduction, probably not.
Right.
So let's find a different way to get the customer interested, and then we can give them more technical data later on in a presentable format.
Right. Let's call this a white paper.
Something.
Or let's call this a technical paper, or
Something.
let's call it something like that, right?
Yeah. Let's do a podcast.
Yeah, there you go. We're doing those with some of our other clients now, where they're, they have these really technical things that they want to talk about, and we do the white papers too, and we do the technical papers, because I don't know. I think there's, I used to say, two kinds of people in this world: readers and video watchers. And you have to have content for both, right? Because if you have PhD after your name, you probably are a reader. You probably did not get through graduate school and earn your PhD without being a reader. And that's probably most of those people are introverts, and they'd rather, read than the other. But more and more, so many people want to hear it. They want to watch a video about it. They want to understand there, and you can give so much more nuance and color if you do it that way. But not everything has to be a brochure, and especially if you're trying to cram all this technical stuff in it, it's certainly not the role of a brochure. No,
and God bless those at trade shows where they've got font size 2 on their pop-up banners, and they want to put everything on there, and I can't read it. So please don't do that anymore. Call out to any B2B marketers out there, or people who are trying to do that. Please stop doing font 2 on your trade show booth, because it's just not being read.
No,
it's just not happening. So
I had an interesting discussion. This is one of those moments where we were talking about pushing back, and the company I was at, we always had a big trade show booth, and it was always at the most critical place in the floor. We were a big company. We really embraced trade shows, and so we invested in it, and we're designing a trade show wall. And I look at this, it was my job to approve it, and I looked at it, and it was what you just described, and I was like, we can't do this. And the designer's like, that's what they want. And the copywriter's like, this is what they want. So it's perfectly crafted. And I was like, let me talk to him. And I said, we can't do that. And the stakeholder's like, why not? He was incredulous about it. And I said, I'll tell you, at this stage of my life, I've been to hundreds of trade shows. And I have never once in my whole time at the trade show seen someone stand and read a wall. I've never seen it.
Correct.
And he goes, you're okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, that, or it's not only reading a wall, but I can't read it because the team is standing in front of the booth, or you have a table in front of the booth.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm not going to read at the floor.
We go around and try to read
correct.
this one. No.
So that also
long form content doesn't work as a wall.
No. So I have the 3-point rule. It's you think of the customer, get the content, and then think the channel. Those are the 3 kind of C's that when I'm talking to my business stakeholders, it's like, okay, what customers are we talking to? What is it? What is their needs? What kind of content do we even have that I can repurpose or not? We have to start from scratch. And then what channels are we going to put them in? And then making sure, because we sometimes can take that content and put it in multiple channels.
Sure.
You can and that's a most cost-effective way of getting what you want out there. But you can't start channel first, brochure.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know who I'm saying it to. And is that the best thing to do? So once I kind of get them into that formula mindset of those steps, then the conversations get a little bit easier, because then they feel like they know their customers really well, and I believe them for that. But then it goes to the next steps of, okay, now I need you in my world. You've introduced me to your world. Now I need you to step into my world to help you understand what I need to do to make this work, and what you've given me does or does not work for these reasons. So let's figure this out so we can get something to work. So again, it goes back to a dialogue.
Yeah. Well, so smart of you, because who's going to follow a process better than the chemist?
Exactly. Again, learning how to speak their language, right?
Absolutely.
When I'm speaking to my designer, I am not talking about process. Because their brain works completely different. Yeah. So I have to be a little bit more, flowery and expressive and creative and emotive. Yes, absolutely. Which is a fun part of the role too. Because I didn't realize that when, about myself, when you said, okay, what do you know? What would you like to know better? I didn't know that I do have a good mix of the analytic and the creativity.
I think it's so critical in these technical roles, not a technical role, but a marketing role within a technical company.
Correct.
If you're a marketer and one day you have to wear steel-toed boots and then you have to be in a boardroom the next day, all those things that you're saying right now are 100%. You should really be listening.
Indeed. And I like it. One day I'm wearing the Wranglers and the boots, and the next day I'm wearing the heels and the dress. That's also my personality too. So it all just kind of fits to me. So then I can bring myself to.
It makes it so much more fun and interesting when you are able to do. I think. Some people hate that. They're like, I don't want to wear steel-toed boots. I don't want to walk around in an air-conditioned plant. I don't want to do these things. But I just find it so fascinating. I'm not really a desk person, and so I love it. So what are you guys doing today from a sales and marketing process? What techniques and tactics are working? I love how you have the very first principles approach to what are we trying to achieve, who's our target audience, all that. But once you do get past all that, what are you guys working on there?
So from a marketing perspective, we, again, try and always start with the customer. And right now, with the chemical industry being in its longest downturn that the industry have seen, according to many experts, resources are limited, whether it's people, money, time, and you're still wanting to make an impact out there, right? So sometimes it's more survival than growth, and then still distinguishing your chemical solutions versus others in the market as well. So what we try and do is really stretch where we can, again, understand the objective and understand how we can really get that ROI. And that's another part of marketing that leaders try and pin you to. What's the ROI? Like, sometimes I'm going to give you a great answer, and sometimes I'm going to give you an answer you're not going to like.
It's challenging.
It is challenging because some things you can track and some things you can't. Or when you have a 5-year sales cycle, I don't know if that trade show is ever going to give you the revenue you want. So that maybe not is the right KPI for that trade show. So let's talk about a different KPI. And if that is not still delivering what you want from a value perspective, then we stop it. But there's no reason to stop something if we don't know why we're doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times there will be like, we're not doing trade shows anymore. But then what are we going to do differently because we still have to talk to the customer?
Yeah.
So we need to be conscious of, yes, where we spend our money and how we're going to do it and stretch it. One thing we do try a whole lot is repurposing existing content. So we might have a case study that we can turn into a blog, that we can turn into a white paper, partnering with media to get an article in an industry publication, thought leadership opportunities we do a lot of, where you're on stage sharing the solutions. But you're not sharing it with just customers, but also just industry experts, the regulators, because sometimes you really do need to speak to the regulators. Think of sustainable aviation fuel, which we are involved in.
Ooh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where you really have to try and understand what you can leverage and where you can leverage it. The marketing automation tools that we've talked about HubSpot earlier in our conversation. That's huge because that you really are able to provide a customized marketing experience. You're understanding where they are in their customer journey based on their behavior in when they're consuming the content. You can track it. So that's been a very helpful tool for us as well.
That is really interesting. I think that I love the thought leadership. I think when you have a technical product, and those guys love talking to the technical community, whether their customers are there or not, and also the repurposing content. I just think that so many people, you work so hard to generate a case study. Those are challenging, and you got to customer to approve it. Yeah, and you just go through all these things. It takes. I remember I had a new boss, and they were like, "How long does it take to do a case study?" And I was like, "Well, that's a challenging question. It's more challenging than you probably think, but I'll give you a range." I said anywhere between 3 months to 3 years.
Excellent answer.
Based on the data in our workflow tool.
Right.
And he was like, "No way." And I'm like, "No, I'm telling you."
Yeah.
They might sit there for a long time before we get customer approval.
That or the data, because there are a lot of times the case studies are based on field trials that they don't come very often. They have to look at the data. Maybe the field trial didn't go well. They have to go back to the drawing board, redo it, redesign it, test it again. So because you really only want a case study of a successful outcome.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you could do a case study on an unsuccessful outcome just to be able to help bring that education to light, but normally it needs to be successful. And we all know, especially in a technical environment, it doesn't happen right the first time.
That's right.
Even though we'd like to, and we try to.
That's the way science works.
That's the way science, indeed. So you have to be very patient. Maybe that was another answer to your earlier question of what have I learned a lot? Patience. Because indeed,
I'm still working on that one.
Yeah. It's like, well, we were hoping to have that field trial done last year, and we had issues, and then there was supply issues, and then we had this issue and that issue, and the field trial is still not done. We still don't have the data. We still don't have a case study. We still don't have content. Okay, so what do we do now? Yeah.
Well, and I guess the point I was trying to make with this, if you go through all that, don't just put it on the website and hope that someone's going to see it.
Yeah.
Repurpose it. Use it everywhere. It should be converted to a social post. It could be like whatever, all those things that you mentioned, I think are all viable uses for a case study and any piece of content. I think people work so hard on these things, throw it on the website and go, especially those technical presentations like you were talking about. Man, there's some gold in that.
There is.
And we just have to, as marketers, be creative and learn how to leverage that. That's the big dearth that we find in technical industries, is that we need more content to get out there in the market, and sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, and so getting creative can really help. We have a whole group of people that we speak to on this podcast, and one is young people. So I think you might have touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation, but what advice would you give to someone just starting out in their career about getting into marketing?
Say yes more than no. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like Nike, but it's true. It's true. Just say yes. What do you have to lose, really? And if you kind of have that mindset, then you're going to discover things that you can do that you didn't know you could do. Because when you're young, yes, you think you know it all. And I'll just nod my head like I do with my older children. Yes, you do know it all. But you don't know what you don't know until you do it.
Yeah.
And so, saying yes to as much as possible, just being curious, just always be learning. And because then again, it's an onion layer exercise, because as soon as you know something, you're going to peel another layer and go, oh, didn't know that, let's dig further there. And so it's just this constant opportunity to develop yourself. And I think when you're working in an organization and they see that you're just constantly wanting to learn and do and apply that, then you're open for feedback, you're open for coaching, you're open for development. People have a tendency to want to work with you more and bring you through the organization, that ones that are like, not interested. Like, all right, well, then I will spend my energy into something else if you're not interested. So that's also something I try and look for when I'm interviewing somebody is, what's your level of curiosity? How much can you and I work together to develop you, to continue to push your boundaries, to learn things and to do things and trial by error.
Well, that's great advice. If you're a young person, rewind that and listen to it again. My son, I want you to listen to that too, like everybody, because I do think it's so important. I think that mindset of put me in, coach, is so important when you're young. Jump in there, just do it, learn. You're going to fail. That's okay. If you're young, people know you're going to fail. They're okay with it.
Yes. Well, that's expected.
Yeah.
It's
part
of
it goes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
They'll help you. They'll coach you. It's fine.
Yeah. Learning from so many different personalities, people, your world just opens up. Living abroad, I remember being in the grocery store, I think the first 2 weeks when I was in the Netherlands, and I'm like, I can't read anything. I'm illiterate. I just earned my MBA. I worked super hard. I am an educated, person. I could not read anything in this grocery store. I mean, there was a few English words, but still, my world shrank, right? I'm like, well, all right, well, we just better learn how to, know what these words are, or I'm not eating.
Yeah, that's a good motivator. Really.
Indeed, it was. It was a very good motivator in the end. But again, you have to be open and, ask lots of questions. So
that is wonderful. I think it must have been such a great experience.
Yeah, it was.
Living overseas.
Yeah.
What haven't we talked about that we should have talked about today?
Those two letters that are called A and I.
Oh.
We have not talked about AI
what?
At all.
This can't be a marketing podcast.
Is it 2026 and we haven't talked about AI?
Yeah. How are you guys using AI?
We have an internal AI agent called Clariant. And she's about 2 years old, and she has changed us in that sense. And it is a centrally led, activity, and that everyone has been asked just to embrace. And she's your personal assistant. So the more you feed her, the more she learns on what your role is, what it is what you do. And then within our global communications function, we've really embraced that. We have one person whose half time is just pursuing AI and building our AI knowledge within the communications function.
Wow, that's cool.
We have a library now of prompts. So if I want to write a blog, I've got a prompt on how to write a blog. It has our language style, our tone, formatting, all of that. So I just put in maybe a case study and out comes a blog.
Wow, nice.
So it's really good. So I don't have to learn how to prompt, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking me as a non-digital native to do things that would take me a long time to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm, having an opportunity to learn from others. So that's super helpful. But, the scientists are using it for formulations. Our sales are using it from a customer behavior perspective. Our logistics team is learning how to do it, from the supply-demand balances and so forth. So we are trying to utilize this in every part of our organization. And because it's internal, we don't have to worry about compliance, IP issues, and anything like that. So sometimes we might use ChatGPT or some of the other public platforms, but because we have our internal one, we don't have to worry so much about what am I putting out there in the world, because some people don't realize when you put it out there, it is now out there.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful with that.
Well, especially on the technical side of your business, my gosh, if a formulation got out, that is serious IP violation that would be very badly for the person and badly for the company. Yeah,
for sure. Again, talking about reputation management, right? There's a whole nother area that, we haven't even begun to touch to. And then AI is also, now we're talking about GEO versus SEO, and that balance is now tipping the other way. And what is our website doing to help feed that GEO engine versus the SEO engine, right? So trying to get ahead of that. So it's definitely one that's going to revolutionize how we're working, but I don't think it'll take away our function. You still need to understand the fundamentals of marketing, customer markets, and so forth.
It's funny working with AI, and sometimes the result you get is amazing. You're like, wow, this is so much better than anticipated. And other times you're like, what the heck is this, And I'm sure it's better with an internal one than an external one. But
no, there have been a few times where Clarita is hallucinating, because that's just not.
That's just not the way that works.
That's not how that works. Or she'll come back and she'll go, I don't know how to respond to that one, So it's just.
Well, I appreciate the honesty, because at least an internal one would do that. Gemini and ChatGPT just throw it out there, and I'm like, where did can you cite your sources on this? And I always know it's trying to BS me when it's like, well, my source really came from an amalgamation of best industry practice and multiple websites. I'm like, okay, well, that's not a source I can cite. So let's start over.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one advice I have for marketers, because I've seen a lot of sameness come out of marketing over the last year and a half. And I think it's because I think some people rely so heavily on it. I think it's weird. I feel like marketers, either not using it enough or relying on it way too heavily. And don't let that be the easy button for you. Really look at it when it comes out. Run it through your human brain. Run it through your expertise. Run it through, does this really work for our brand? Run it through all those different lenses before you go, yep, that's good, go.
Yeah.
Because I think it's not going to be creative, really.
No.
Like true creativity.
Right.
And so when you see these things come out, it's another tool in the toolbox, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But use it. You should use the tool. I love technology, and so I was like, we got to get more into AI, guys. And so everyone, when you're the CEO of your company, everybody's like,
okay, boss says we got to do it.
Boss
Let's
says
go.
Richard said do it. Next thing I know, we've got all these tools, and because there's no shortage of AI tools out there for marketers, I can promise you.
It's like a gold rush aspect, right? And so that's hard it's a hard thing to herd because you're going to strike and you're going to strike out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the human discernment comes in. And you're also seeing as well, not only just with the AI bit, but like the whole social media. We now have enough data to understand how that's impacting us from a human perspective. It's causing more anxiety. It's causing more loneliness. It's causing a non-connective human environment of which, that's not how we're built. And so there is you're seeing that trend coming back to we need to have a human element to all of this digital, which for you and I who are non-digital natives, we're like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We talk to each other. However, when you're looking at the digital natives that are growing up, that is not as inherent for them. So I am curious to see how that evolves over the next 10 years on how those digital natives will be able to balance that knowledge that they have with that human connection when that wasn't as one of their sharper muscles that they've developed as they've gotten older. Because I do see marketing as one where it's going to be a person managing a bunch of different AI bots that do a lot of different things.
Specialized.
Exactly, very specialized. So then there's a lot more efficiency. I can see that, but you're still going to need a human involved in all of this. So you're going to need to so the marketer's going to have a different, makeup. So that's another thing from a college student perspective, what you're studying is you need to understand consumer behavior. That is the fundamental part about marketing that a human needs to get.
Know your audience.
There's an intuition aspect of it. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And I'm learning from it. And then the actual execution of that, which I can see comes from a digital standpoint. So it will be very interesting to see that progression over the next 10, 20 years.
I'm really interested in how that is going to develop and, what does that mean for all the different, professional knowledge worker jobs, not just marketing, across the board. We had a client that we just signed on, and they are a recruiting firm, and they were talking about how AI has so negatively impacted that world of it's like an arms race in that industry because to accept a job through any of these job boards or apps or LinkedIn or any of these things, it's so algorithm driven. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a guy, and he was the CEO of his company, and he applied because they weren't getting the right roles. He's like, let me apply for this job. And it was like 2 levels down, and he wasn't qualified. Nobody ever got back to him. He got ghosted, all these things. So he's like, this is broken. This is not right. And I think people that are looking for work, they're fairly motivated, and they're using AI. And so all of a sudden, you've got an AI talking to another and so they're using AI to write their resume, do all these things. So you've got AIs talking to AIs and robots to robots, and there's no human on the side, on the other side going, or it takes a very long time for a human on either side to look at it and go, well, does this person fit my culture? Are they really a lifelong learner? All those things that you're trying to sniff out when you're hiring people, it just escalates so far before anybody is talking to each other, and you go, that is interesting. And I think that was an early adopter of it, and you go, hope that doesn't happen across the board. But it seems like someone once told me you don't have to live it to learn it. But I think, unfortunately, most people do have to live it to learn it. And so I think maybe we'll I think across different domains and industries, I think people are going to have to learn that rule of, robots talking to robots is not as efficient as it looked like when we came up with this idea. Because that was, I think, my big thing was I never wanted to use AI for efficient or for, end product for our clients, because they're all specialized. Really, everything's pretty bespoke in our world, as it is in yours. But I thought we could certainly use it as an efficiency gain, and it has.
Yes, it has.
But I think you get to a point of diminishing returns, where it's a bell curve, right? Efficient, efficient, efficient. Now it's wildly inefficient because what we delivered wasn't good. Okay, let's go back.
Yeah, or we have to go back and figure out where that sweet spot is and where it helps us and where it starts hurting us. And that's why it's a gold rush type opportunity right now, right? Where we're all trying to figure out where that is, and it's a mad dash, and it'll settle at a certain point. I think the true thing that a lot of people aren't realizing that's going to be an interesting trend that impacts the petrochemical industry and the oil and gas industry is the amount of energy that's going to take to fuel the data centers that fuels this rapid AI adoption, and not just here in the developed world, but also in the developing, where they still are struggling to having their basic needs met, right? So I think that is a trend that, not just a trend, that is a trend that is upon us, and also how is that going to impact the future landscape of the energy sector that impacts everybody. So it'll be another one to watch for
That's
sure.
a huge one. Data centers are one of these things. Texas is such a business friendly environment, and we're encouraging those data centers to come here, and they want to come here because it is such a business-friendly environment. So these things are springing up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, and our grid's not the best. And you go, okay, well, where's all this extra capacity going to come from? What does that mean for us? Are we going to have? I don't want to have a rolling brownout in Houston, Texas, in August.
No, the data centers will need to be self-sufficient and not tap into our own consumer grid, but still, I hear you on that one.
But I think it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out, but it does harken back to what, I think a lot of people are saying is that we're going to need more energy. We're going to need it across every, more
available
wind,
energy
solar,
resource we can tap into. We need it all. It's an and discussion now. So and that narrative needs to be put out there a lot stronger.
Yeah, I agree. And that's maybe when people ask you, when you ask that question of your recruits of how would you defend the industry, that's a great example of it, right? Because it's not a cut and dry answer like many things in this world. It's challenging, right? I mean, we like electricity. I love to plug in my iPhone and charge it every night. It's good.
Right. I love my air conditioner in June, July, August, September in Houston.
Well,
so let's
all the
keep
way
that
through November.
Right. Let's keep that going. Indeed. I think one of the questions that we didn't cover, and I think it's a really good one, is around the biggest misconception that people have.
Yeah. Talk to me about that.
I believe the biggest misconception that people have around oil and gas and petrochemicals is that it's all dangerous, it's all toxic, it's all bad, and we can live without it. We just, let's just erase it from the globe. And people just really don't realize how much we touch it and experience it everywhere. I mean, if you look at Clariant, we make fire retardant solutions for textiles and for architectural buildings. So it slows the ability for the combustion to happen. So your clothes aren't going to, catch on fire.
Pretty useful for firefighters.
Very useful for firefighters. It's also useful for structures, so they can, withstand some of that heat before it collapses, right? So these are important things. We also create desiccant humidifier indexes, so that helps us to be able to determine the humidity level in packaging, so water doesn't damage things. Think of your Amazon shipments, or think of medical applications where you don't want water, to get in there. So those are important everyday things that we don't think about. You can also think around anti-statics that's in plastic. Everyone's like, oh, plastic's really bad. Get it. But if you don't have the anti-statics in the plastic, then you're going to get dust in your bottles, or you can dust in the food, and that's also something that we don't want. In medical packaging, again, you can't have dust sometimes in a medical packaging. Can you imagine what that could do to an open wound? So these are the small little nuances where chemical solutions are found that we need to have if we're wanting to continue to thrive and live and grow and have food and clean water and so forth. So I think it's one of those things where I really connect with Clariant's, overall purpose of greater chemistry for people on the planet. So we are improving our lives, we are improving the planet, and trying to find the right chemical solutions to do so. So that does going to require, again, the college student who wants a STEM who's looking for a STEM career, that's really exciting. And you don't necessarily hear that as well. A lot of the college students want to work for the Googles and the Metas of the world. And it's like, hey, wait a minute, you guys really could make an impact in the future if you can help us find these innovative solutions, look at nature, and try and find things that improve our lives that isn't going to use as much energy, because we need the energy for other things, right? So let's also reposition how we use the current industry for things. And that's where creativity comes in. That's where curiosity comes in. It's just been a wild theme today in our conversation. So maybe just marketers are listening to us, but if there are STEM, college students, the future is bright, and really want to encourage those, smart kids out there. There's careers out there for you. Just, don't give up.
Yeah, you're right too, because I think, chemistry was, I was growing up, was really respected. I knew a lot of people wanted to be chemists. I grew up here in Houston, so this is a lot of chemical engineers in this city. But and so that was one of my friends' dad was this really nice, cool guy, and they made good money. And I was like, wow, what's your dad do? He has a cool sports car. You guys get to go on awesome vacations. You have this big, beautiful home. And it's like, oh, he's a chemical engineer for Exxon. And I was like, oh, maybe I should be a chemical engineer. And then Miss Olson crushed my dreams and said that was really not my thing. But yeah, I thought, that would be a cool job. And there was no negative stigma around it. But I think, there can't be a negative stigma around it. But really, if you think about it, that's where the rubber really meets the road on solving these real big, we have a lot of challenges in the world. And chemistry is one of the areas where it's the practical application to solve a lot of those challenges.
Absolutely.
And I think that would be a really interesting and fun career to get to see all these things, come to life and, see these things go and change industries. And it's so niched and nuanced, right? And you don't realize it until you get in there that, it's people that are in manufacturing or they're developing something or they're in some sort of process industry. Those guys run into these challenges all the time. And a lot of times the thing that's going to solve that problem is going to be a chemical solution. That's the stuff you use every day.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
so you go, wow, if something happened, and I think we saw it during the pandemic, right, with supply chain issues, and all of a sudden these things that we just thought, oh yeah, they're just going to magically show up at our house 2 days after I ordered it on Amazon, didn't show up 2 days after that. And you're like, because all that was disrupted, and I think it's something that we really take for granted today. Yeah, for sure. Well, any parting words for our audience?
I just appreciate the opportunity to have this nice conversation and be able to share, marketing, the world of marketing in a B2B space, which is very different than the world of marketing in a B2C space, I believe. They say B2B marketers or the data is demonstrating that B2B marketing is very similar to B2C marketing because of the analytics. You're able to see the customer. Customers are doing a lot more digital research before they even contact, a potential customer for, a sample or a quote or whatever. In the end, though, consumers probably don't have a 5-year sales cycle for some aspects.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's still some nuances between the two. And like I said, I'm still hooked even after how many years has it been since my first day of my marketing class in college.
It really is a different animal, and it is challenging. And I think the challenge changes every day, and it changes by, like you were talking about, different industries, geographies, all those things. And so I think that's the thing that keeps me coming back to this crazy world, and just seeing learning about these interesting businesses, and you go, wow, people, of course somebody has to make that. Oh, and you can make good money doing that too. Interesting. And what are their challenges in this? Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for being on board. I love the conversation, and I love nerding out about this stuff. So
it was a fun one. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, sharing, or spreading the news about us on your favorite channel. Thank you for tuning into Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. Until next time, stay above the clouds.